She put my land up for sale before lunch, but the county records still had my name on every inch of it. I was driving past the east edge of Pine Hollow Estates at 11:37 on a Saturday morning when I saw the sign standing in the middle of my empty lot like it had grown out of the grass overnight. It was white, clean, and expensive looking, with dark green lettering that read Future Pine Hollow Home Site. Inquire through Association Office. Below that was the phone number for the Pine Hollow Estates Homeowners Association. For a few seconds, I did not even pull over. I just slowed my truck, looked at the two wooden survey stakes near the ditch, looked at the gravel access strip from the county road, and looked at the sign again, because my brain needed one extra moment to accept that someone had actually advertised my land without calling me, emailing me, mailing me, or having any right to do it. Then I saw Diane Mercer standing near the sign with a folder tucked under one arm and a couple in weekend clothes beside her. The man was pointing toward the back tree line, and the woman was looking down at her phone like she was calculating where a driveway might go. Diane was smiling the way people smile when they think the hard part is already handled. She was the president of Pine Hollow Estates, and from the moment I bought those two undeveloped parcels, she had treated them less like private land and more like unfinished business the association needed to correct. I pulled onto the shoulder, parked behind the ditch, and took 3 photographs before I stepped out. The sign, Diane, the buyers, and the survey stakes all in one frame. Then I took a wider shot showing my truck, the county road, and the lot entrance. I did not touch the sign. I did not raise my voice. I did not walk straight at the buyers like they had done something wrong. They had probably been told a version of the truth that made Diane sound official. I opened the folder I kept under the passenger seat and checked the first page again, even though I already knew what it said. Warranty deed, parcel numbers, county tax record, survey reference, my name, my address, my signature from closing. Not Pine Hollow Estates, not the association, not Diane Mercer. I walked up slowly and introduced myself as the owner of record for both lots. The buyers looked surprised. Diane looked irritated, not surprised, which told me everything I needed to know. She said the association was facilitating a responsible transfer because the parcels affected community growth continuity and had remained non-compliant with neighborhood expectations. I asked her, in front of the buyers, whether she had a signed listing agreement, written owner authorization, court order, tax sale record, deed transfer, lien foreclosure document, or recorded authority allowing the homeowners association to market my property. She said this was not the place for technical hostility. I said selling land without the owner's permission was exactly the place for technical details. The buyers stepped back from the sign. Diane opened her folder and pulled out a Pine Hollow map, a community standards page, and a printed email with the phrase association facilitated transfer highlighted. None of it had my signature. None of it had a county stamp. None of it changed the owner of record. I took one more photo of the sign from the side, showing that the post was planted several feet inside my parcel line. Then I called the county sheriff office and requested a deputy for an unauthorized sale sign and false property representation on private land. Diane told the buyers I was escalating a simple community matter. I told them they should stay because the county map was about to explain the difference between a community matter and someone else's deed. 3 weeks before that sign appeared in the middle of my lot, those two parcels had looked like the quietest pieces of land in the county. They sat along the east edge of Pine Hollow Estates, just outside the subdivision line, 2 undeveloped lots with tall grass, a shallow drainage ditch, a gravel access strip from the county road, and a back tree line that turned gold in the late afternoon. Most people probably saw them as empty ground waiting for someone else to decide their future. I saw something cleaner than that. I saw land with boundaries, parcel numbers, tax records, survey stakes, and a deed that did not need anyone's approval to exist. My name is Caleb Warren, and I bought those lots because I wanted space, not permission. The closing packet had been clear from the beginning. The warranty deed listed both parcel numbers separately. The title commitment showed no transfer to Pine Hollow Estates, no common area dedication, no association ownership interest, and no recorded right for the homeowners association to sell, market, manage, or approve the lots. The county tax records showed the bills would come to me directly. The survey showed the subdivision boundary stopping west of my property line, with my parcels touching the edge of Pine Hollow, but not sitting inside it. The access easement came from the county road, not from a private HOA street. The boundary markers were already placed, wooden stakes with orange ribbon near the ditch and metal pins set farther back near the tree line. Before closing, I asked the title officer, Mark Ellison, to double-check every exception because undeveloped land near a subdivision can attract opinions the way porch lights attract insects. Mark confirmed there was no recorded covenant tying the lots to Pine Hollow Estates and no document giving the association listing authority or development control. He said the lots were private parcels adjacent to the subdivision, not subdivision property. That sentence was simple enough to fit on one line, but it would later become the line Diane Mercer kept trying to walk around. Diane first contacted me 2 days after closing. Her email was polite, polished, and full of phrases that sounded official until you looked for a county stamp. She congratulated me on acquiring land in what she called the Pine Hollow Growth Corridor and said the association looked forward to reviewing my intentions for the parcels. She mentioned planned residential continuity, frontage appearance, compatible development, and the need to avoid stalled ownership along the community edge. I replied that I had not purchased land inside Pine Hollow Estates and that I would follow county requirements, recorded restrictions, and valid property law. If the association believed it had authority over my lots, I asked her to send the recorded document showing that authority. She did not send one. Instead, she sent a community standards packet with a map shaded in green around the subdivision entrance and the east frontage area. My parcels were colored like they belonged to a plan, but the map did not include parcel numbers, legal descriptions, signatures, or recording information. It was not a survey. It was not a deed. It was an internal wish drawn over real property. I printed her email, wrote the date on it, and placed it behind my closing documents. At the time, I thought I was being overly careful. I thought the worst she might do was complain about mowing or send another letter about community image. I did not understand yet that Diane was not trying to comment on my land. She was preparing to speak about it as if I had already lost the right to speak for myself. Diane Mercer's first visit to the lots came the following Saturday, and she arrived dressed as if tall grass itself had violated a bylaw. I was near the gravel access strip with a measuring wheel, checking the distance from the county road to the first survey stake, when her silver sport utility vehicle slowed along the shoulder and stopped beside the ditch. She stepped out holding a slim folder and looked across both parcels with the expression of someone inspecting a room after a careless guest had left it messy. Behind her, Pine Hollow Estates looked finished in the way associations like things to look finished. Matching mailboxes, trimmed lawns, stone entry columns, clean sidewalks, and flower beds that changed with the season. My lots looked different because they were still honest land. The grass had not been flattened into a lawn. The tree line had not been cleared. The soil near the ditch held tire marks from the survey crew. Orange ribbons flickered from wooden stakes in the wind. Diane said she wanted to discuss the future of the community edge before misunderstandings became expensive. I asked what kind of misunderstandings she meant. She said Pine Hollow had invested years into creating a consistent residential approach and undeveloped parcels along. The east side created uncertainty for buyers, residents, and future property values. I told her uncertainty was not the same as ownership. She smiled tightly and said I was focusing on legal boundaries while ignoring planned residential continuity. That was the second phrase I wrote down later. The first had been growth corridor. The second was planned residential continuity. Both phrases sounded important, and neither one appeared in my deed. Diane opened her folder and showed me the association's internal frontage map. My 2 parcels were shaded in pale green, with arrows pointing from the Pine Hollow entrance toward the county road. The map labeled the area Future Community Integration Zone. I asked whether the map had been recorded with the county. She said it was part of the association's long-term planning materials. I asked whether it changed ownership of my parcel numbers. She said ownership was not the only concern when land affected the surrounding community. I asked whether the homeowners association had a signed agreement with me, a purchase contract, a right of first refusal, a recorded development restriction, or any authority to approve or deny my use of the land. She said the board expected cooperation from responsible owners. Expected again. I was starting to understand that Diane used that word when the documents ran out. She told me the lots could not be allowed to sit idle indefinitely because stalled land created visual uncertainty and invited speculation. I told her I had owned them for less than a week, and the only speculation I was seeing came from Pine Hollow. She ignored that and asked whether I intended to build, sell, mow, fence, or hold the lots vacant. I said I intended to follow county rules and my own timeline. Her face changed just slightly at that. Not anger exactly, but the look of a person hearing a door close quietly. She said if I refused to coordinate, the association might have to consider options for preserving neighborhood continuity. I asked her to put any claimed authority in writing and include recorded references, parcel numbers, signatures, and county filing information. She said formal language would follow. After she drove away, I stood between the two stakes and looked back at the entrance sign for Pine Hollow Estates. The stone columns made the neighborhood look permanent, but stone columns do not own land. I took photographs of the survey stakes, the internal map she had left in my hand, the county road access, and the subdivision boundary marker near the ditch. Then I wrote a note in my phone. Diane wants the lots treated like Pine Hollow property without showing how they became Pine Hollow property. That was the moment I stopped thinking of her messages as ordinary pressure and started treating every sentence from the association as part of a record I might one day need someone else to read. The formal notice arrived on Monday morning with the Pine Hollow Estates logo at the top, even though neither of my parcels had ever belonged to Pine Hollow Estates. I printed it before I answered because I wanted Diane Mercer's words on paper beside the deed, the county map, and the survey. The subject line read Community Growth Corridor Coordination Required, and the letter said my empty lots occupied a sensitive frontage position affecting neighborhood presentation, residential continuity, buyer confidence, and long-term property values. It requested that I submit a mowing schedule, a development timeline, a proposed exterior concept, a preferred builder list, and a written statement of whether I intended to sell, hold, or improve the parcels. It also warned that failure to coordinate could cause the association to pursue appropriate preservation options to protect the community edge. I read that sentence twice because it was shaped like a threat without using a threatening word. Preservation options did not mean anything by itself. It did not appear in the deed. It did not appear in the title commitment. It did not appear in the county records. It was a phrase built to sound heavier than it was. I opened my closing folder and placed the notice behind the warranty deed. Then I wrote my response from my kitchen table, where the survey copy was spread beside my laptop. I stated that I was the owner of record for both parcel numbers, that the lots were private property outside the Pine Hollow Estates subdivision boundary, and that I would comply with county requirements and recorded restrictions only. I asked Diane to provide any recorded covenant, deed restriction, easement, right of first refusal, ownership interest, listing agreement, sale authorization, court order, lien foreclosure record, tax sale document, or other legal instrument allowing the homeowners association to control, market, sell, transfer, approve, or represent my lots. I copied the management company and saved the email as a PDF. Diane replied the same afternoon. She said my tone was unnecessarily legalistic and that Pine Hollow had a responsibility to prevent stalled land from damaging community confidence. She said the board had discussed the parcels for years as part of the natural residential expansion area, and that my refusal to provide a plan forced the association to evaluate other pathways for responsible transition. I sat with that phrase for a moment. Responsible transition. It sounded polite until you asked what was transitioning, from whom, and by what authority. I asked again for recorded documents. She did not send any. Instead, 2 days later, I received a packet with the same internal green-shaded map, a community standards page, a frontage maintenance memo from a prior board, and a printed paragraph about preserving neighborhood identity. None of it named my parcels as association property. None of it included my signature. None of it had a county recording number. I called Mark Ellison, the title officer, and asked him to recheck whether any late recorded document, lien process, or association claim had appeared since closing. He called back before the end of the day and confirmed nothing had changed. The title file still showed me as owner, the county records still matched the deed, and there was no recorded authority giving Pine Hollow Estates the right to sell or represent the lots. The next morning, I drove to the county records office and met with Emily Carter at the public counter. She pulled the parcel ownership printouts, county geographic information system map, tax status page, subdivision plat, and recorded document search. My name was on both parcel records. The tax account was mine. The subdivision line stopped west of my boundary. There was no common area dedication, no association transfer, no listing authority, and no lien foreclosure in the file. Emily stamped the retrieval date on the printouts and reminded me she could not give legal advice, only records. That was fine with me. Records were exactly what Diane kept avoiding. When I left the county office, I had a folder thick enough to answer every phrase she had invented. By then, I thought the dispute was still about letters, maps, and pressure. I did not know Diane was about to stop asking for control and start pretending she already had it. The email that changed the tone arrived Thursday evening, one day after I came back from the county records office. It was shorter than Diane Mercer's earlier notices, but somehow more dangerous because it stopped asking me to cooperate and started describing my land as if a decision had already been made. The subject line read Association Facilitated Transfer Review, and the first sentence said Pine Hollow Estates had determined that unresolved frontage parcels may require structured transition to preserve neighborhood continuity. I read it once standing in the kitchen, then sat down and read it again with the county ownership printouts spread beside me. Diane wrote that my refusal to submit a development timeline, mowing schedule, sale intent, or approved builder plan had created uncertainty for residents and prospective homeowners. She said the board had a duty to protect community-facing land from stalled ownership, speculative holding, and incompatible future use. Then came the phrase that made me print the email immediately. The association may begin an association-facilitated transfer process if voluntary owner coordination remains unavailable. There was no listing agreement attached, no purchase offer, no broker authorization, no court order, no tax sale record, no lien foreclosure, no signed document from me, no recorded right of first refusal, no deed, no county stamp. It was a sentence pretending to be a mechanism. I forwarded the email to Mark Ellison at the title office and asked him to confirm, in writing, whether Pine Hollow Estates had any recorded authority to facilitate a sale or transfer of my parcels. Then I forwarded it to myself at a second email address, saved it as a PDF, and placed a printed copy behind Emily Carter's county records packet. Mark called the next morning. He did not sound alarmed, but he sounded precise, which was better. He said the title file showed no recorded document giving Pine Hollow Estates authority to sell, list, transfer, market, or facilitate transfer of the lots. He said any sale of private property would require the owner's authorization or a valid legal process, and nothing in the file showed either. I asked him to put that in a letter. By noon, I had it. His title confirmation named both parcel numbers, repeated the ownership status, and stated that the title search did not reflect any association sale authority, listing rights, transfer rights, or ownership interest. I printed 2 copies and put one in the folder under the driver's seat of my truck. That afternoon, I drove back to the lots and placed small private property markers just inside the survey stakes, not big enough to look aggressive, just clear enough to show where the line began. I took photos from 4 angles: county road access, ditch line, east parcel, west parcel, and the Pine Hollow entrance in the background. The lots looked peaceful, almost boring, with tall grass moving in the wind and the tree line standing quiet beyond the back pins. But the record around them was no longer quiet. Diane had now used the word transfer in writing, and that meant the story was moving from pressure into representation. On Friday, I noticed something else. A car I did not recognize slowed near the lots, stopped for almost a minute, then pulled away. A second vehicle did the same later that afternoon. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe people were only curious about undeveloped land near a subdivision. But after Diane's email, I no longer treated coincidence as harmless without documentation. I installed a small trail camera on a fence post inside my boundary, facing the gravel access strip and the front survey stakes. I made sure it pointed at my land, not into any home or private yard, and I tested the timestamp twice. That evening, Diane sent one more message saying Pine Hollow remained committed to a responsible outcome for the parcels and that interested parties had begun asking questions about future availability. Interested parties. Future availability. She was careful not to say buyers, and that was why I knew buyers were exactly what she meant. I did not answer her. I opened my folder, checked the warranty deed again, and wrote one sentence at the top of my timeline. If someone is being shown these lots, They are being shown land that is not for sale through Pine Hollow Estates. Saturday morning started quietly enough that I almost convinced myself Diane Mercer would keep the dispute inside email where it belonged. I was at my kitchen table, sorting the county packet into a cleaner binder, when the trail camera alert came through at 8:12. The first image showed a dark pickup stopped near the gravel access strip, close to the front survey stakes on the east parcel. The second image showed a man stepping out with a post driver and a white sign panel wrapped in plastic. The third image showed Diane's silver sport utility vehicle parked behind him on the shoulder, angled just far enough off the county road to look temporary. I enlarged the picture until the orange ribbon on my survey stake was clear in the background. The sign was not on the road shoulder. It was not in the ditch. It was inside my parcel line. I saved every image, downloaded the camera clips, and wrote down the time before I even stood up. By 8:24, the man had driven the signpost into the ground. By 8:31, Diane was standing beside it with her folder open, looking at the result as if she had corrected a mistake. I could not read the full wording from the trail camera angle, but I could see enough. Future Pine Hollow Home Site. Association Office. Phone number. It was not a simple notice. It was not a request for discussion. It was a public invitation for someone to inquire about land I owned through an office that had no authority from me. I called Mark Ellison first and told him the association had placed a sign on the property. He told me not to remove it until I documented its location, wording, and any witnesses, especially if people were being shown the lots. Then I called Emily Carter at the county records office and asked whether anything had recorded overnight that could change ownership or listing authority. She checked while I waited on the line. Nothing had changed. My name was still on both parcels. No lien foreclosure. No tax sale. No transfer. No association interest. No recorded instrument giving Pine Hollow Estates authority to market anything. I thanked her, printed the trail camera images, and added them to the binder. Around 10:40, the trail camera sent another alert. This time a blue sedan had stopped near the sign, and two people were standing with Diane near the gravel access strip. The man pointed toward the tree line. The woman looked at her phone, then at the sign, then back toward Diane. They were not neighbors wandering by. They looked like buyers being given a showing. I took my folder, my phone, and the county packet, then drove toward the lots without calling Diane, because I wanted the scene exactly as she had created it. On the way, I passed the Pine Hollow entrance, where the stone columns and trimmed flowers made everything look official by association. That was the trick Diane had been relying on from the beginning. Put a sign near a polished subdivision. Add an office phone number. Use words like future home site and responsible transfer. Most people would assume authority existed somewhere behind the presentation. But ownership does not transfer through confidence, and land does not become available because an association president learns to speak in polished phrases. When I pulled onto the shoulder at 11:37, the sign was standing in the middle of my lot. The buyers were still there, and Diane was explaining something with her folder open. I parked where the county road, survey stakes, sign, and buyers were all visible from my truck camera. Then I started taking photos, because before I said a single word, I wanted the record to see exactly what Pine Hollow Estates had decided to pretend. I walked toward Diane Mercer slowly, not because I was unsure, but because every step gave my phone camera a clearer view of the sign, the survey stakes, the gravel access strip, the buyers, and the folder in her hand. The sign looked even worse up close. Future Pine Hollow Home Site was printed in clean dark green letters across the top, and under it, smaller text said Inquire Through Association Office, followed by the Pine Hollow Estates Homeowners Association phone number. It did not say private property. It did not say owner contact required. It did not say proposed discussion or planning inquiry. It made my land look available through an office that had never owned 1 inch of it. Diane saw me coming and tried to take control of the moment before I reached the sign. She told the buyers I was the current parcel holder and that the association was working through a coordination issue related to responsible transfer. The man looked confused immediately. The woman lowered her phone and asked if I was the seller. I said no, because the lots were not listed for sale through Pine Hollow Estates, and I had given the association no authority to market, represent, show, transfer, or negotiate anything involving my property. The woman looked at Diane, then back at the sign. Diane smiled like the question itself was inconvenient, and said the association was facilitating a pathway because the parcels had remained unresolved and community-facing for too long. I asked her to show the signed listing agreement. She said this was not a traditional listing. I asked for written owner authorization. She said the association was operating under its preservation authority. I asked for the recorded covenant, deed transfer, court order, tax sale document, lien foreclosure record, right of first refusal, broker agreement, or county record giving Pine Hollow Estates that authority. Diane's smile held, but her voice sharpened. She said I was creating confusion in front of interested parties. I told her the confusion had been planted in the ground with that sign. The buyers stepped a few feet away from the post. The man said they had been told the association could help make the property available if the owner refused to cooperate with neighborhood standards. That sentence mattered, so I asked if he would repeat it while I wrote it down. He looked uncomfortable, but he nodded and said Diane had explained that Pine Hollow wanted a proper home built there and that the lots were moving toward an association-facilitated transfer. Diane immediately said he was misunderstanding a broader planning conversation. I asked her again, calmly, whether she had my signature on any document authorizing that conversation with buyers. She did not answer. Instead, she opened her folder and showed the same green-shaded internal map, the community standards page, and the email where she had written Association Facilitated Transfer Review. I held up my county ownership printout beside her map. Her page had colors. Mine had parcel numbers. Her page had arrows. Mine had my name. Her page had no recording information. Mine came from the county records office with the retrieval date stamped at the bottom. I told the buyers they had a right to know that the lots were private property, that I was the owner of record, and that Pine Hollow Estates had produced no document showing authority to sell or represent them. Then I called the county sheriff office, explained that an unauthorized sale-style sign had been placed on my private parcel, that buyers were present, and that the association president was representing a possible transfer without owner authorization. Diane told me I was embarrassing the community. I said the community was not the one standing beside a sign on land it did not own. While we waited for the deputy, I took photographs from every angle. The sign face, the post base inside the property line, the survey stake behind it, Diane's vehicle on the shoulder, the buyers near the gravel strip, and the Pine Hollow entrance in the background. I also photographed the documents Diane had chosen to show me, with her fingers still resting on the internal map as if colors could do what deeds do. The buyers stood quietly now, no longer looking at the tree line or the driveway possibilities. They were looking at the sign, then at my folder, then at Diane. That was when I understood the sign had already failed. It had been meant to make strangers believe Pine Hollow had power over my land. Instead, before the deputy even arrived, it had turned those strangers into witnesses. Deputy Frank Harris arrived about 12 minutes after the call, and the first thing he did was slow his vehicle beside the county road instead of driving onto the lot. That mattered to me because it showed he understood where the question began, who had permission to be on the land and who did not. He stepped out with a notebook, looked at the sign, looked at the survey stakes, looked at Diane Mercer, then looked at the buyers standing several feet away with the kind of silence people have when they realize they may have been pulled into someone else's problem. I introduced myself as Caleb Warren, owner of record for both parcels, and handed him my driver's license, warranty deed copy, county parcel ownership printouts, tax status page, subdivision plat, survey reference, title confirmation from Mark Ellison, and the trail camera images showing the sign being installed that morning. I told him I had not authorized Pine Hollow Estates to place a sign, show the property, market the lots, discuss a transfer with buyers, or represent any sale. Deputy Harris read the parcel numbers first, then looked at the county map. He asked Diane what authority Pine Hollow Estates had to place the sign. Diane immediately opened her folder and began explaining community growth continuity, frontage preservation, unfinished residential edges, and the association's responsibility to protect neighborhood values. Deputy Harris listened, then asked a much shorter question. Did she have written authorization from the owner? Diane said the association was pursuing an association-facilitated transfer review. He asked if that meant she had a signed listing agreement. She said it was not a conventional listing. He asked if she had a court order, tax sale record, lien foreclosure document, deed transfer, recorded easement, right of first refusal, broker agreement, or county document naming Pine Hollow Estates as an authorized representative for the property. Diane said the internal map showed the parcels as part of the community's future planning area. Deputy Harris looked at the map and asked whether it was recorded with the county. She said it was an association planning document. He handed it back. The buyers were listening to every word. The woman asked Diane quietly whether the lots were actually for sale. Diane said the association was working toward responsible availability and that the owner had created unnecessary delay. I said nothing because the deputy had already heard enough. He walked to the signpost and asked me to point out the nearest survey stake without moving anything. I showed him the orange ribbon near the ditch and the metal pin location marked on the survey copy. He compared the sign placement to the map, then asked Diane who installed it. She said a maintenance vendor placed it at the association's direction. Deputy Harris wrote that down. He asked whether the vendor had permission from me to enter the parcel. Diane said the association believed the location was within the community-facing frontage. He asked again whether the vendor had permission from the owner of record. She did not answer directly. The man buyer then said they had called the association office after hearing that a home site might become available near Pine Hollow, and Diane had invited them to walk the property that morning. Deputy Harris asked if they had been told the association owned the land. The man said not exactly, but they were led to believe the association could make the transfer happen. That sentence changed the weight of the scene. It was no longer just a sign in tall grass. It was a public representation that could mislead people standing on private property. Deputy Harris turned back to Diane and said the documents in front of him showed the parcels belonged to me, and unless she had valid written authority, Pine Hollow Estates could not market, show, or represent the lots as available through the association. Diane said the deputy was being drawn into a civil disagreement. He said property ownership often is civil, but placing a sale-style sign on land without the owner's consent still needed to be corrected before more people were misled. Then he asked Diane to remove the sign, or authorize its removal while he documented the incident. The buyers looked at the sign one more time, and Diane's folder suddenly seemed very thin. Diane Mercer did not move for several seconds after Deputy Harris asked for the sign to come down, and that pause said more than any statement she had made that morning. The buyers stood near the gravel access strip, watching her instead of the lot, and I could tell the entire showing had shifted from possibility to explanation. Diane tried one final time to keep control. She said removing the sign in front of interested parties would create an unnecessary public misunderstanding and damage Pine Hollow's reputation. Deputy Harris looked at the sign, then at my county ownership printout, and said the misunderstanding had started when the sign went into private property without the owner's authorization. He asked again whether she wanted to remove it herself or have the maintenance vendor return immediately. Diane called someone from the association office, speaking quietly at first, then more sharply when the person on the other end asked questions she did not want to answer in front of us. While she talked, Deputy Harris took photographs of the sign face, the post location, the survey stake, the ditch, the county road, and the Pine Hollow entrance in the background. He asked me to confirm that I had not given written or verbal permission for the sign. I confirmed it. He asked the buyers if they were willing to provide contact information for a statement about why they came to the property. The woman gave her name and said they had called the association after hearing a future home site might be available. The man added that Diane had described the situation as a transition issue involving an owner who was not cooperating with community standards. Deputy Harris wrote the phrase transition issue exactly as the man said it. Diane ended her call and said the vendor was unavailable, which was the first practical sentence she had spoken all morning. Deputy Harris asked if she was authorizing removal of the sign now to prevent further confusion. Diane hesitated, then said the association did not concede any legal position but would temporarily withdraw the sign pending review. He told her he was documenting that response. I asked whether I could remove the sign from my land under his observation. He said yes, as long as the location had been photographed and the sign was preserved. I pulled on work gloves from my truck, loosened the soil around the post, and lifted the sign straight out without bending it. It came up easier than I expected, which made the whole thing feel even more insulting. Something planted that casually had been used to suggest ownership that did not exist. I laid the sign flat in the bed of my truck, while Deputy Harris took one more photo. The buyers stood beside their car, no longer looking embarrassed, but annoyed in a quiet way. The woman asked Diane whether Pine Hollow had intended to sell them land it did not own. Diane said that was an unfair characterization of a complex planning matter. The man said it had not sounded complex when they were invited to walk the property. I wrote that down because it was the kind of sentence that survives a meeting better than a speech. Deputy Harris gave me an incident number and explained that the report would note an unauthorized sale-style sign placed on private property, owner records provided at the scene, association documents reviewed, and the sign removed after verification. He advised Diane not to place another sign, bring buyers, or represent the parcels as available without written owner authorization or valid legal process. Diane said the board would hear about this. I told her I was counting on it. After the deputy left, the buyers asked if they could send me a short email describing what they had been told. I gave them a card with my email address and thanked them for staying. Diane drove away without looking at the empty spot where the sign had been. I stayed behind for a few minutes, photographing the hole in the grass, the survey stake, and the clear view from the county road. The lots were still empty, but the silence felt different now. Before that morning, Diane had been able to hide behind future plans, shaded maps, and polished phrases. After that morning, there was a sheriff incident. Number, buyer witnesses, signed photos, and one clean fact no internal map could redraw. Pine Hollow Estates had tried to speak for land it did not own, and the record had answered in public. By Monday morning, the buyers had sent me an email that said exactly what Deputy Harris had heard at the lot. They had contacted the Pine Hollow Estates office after being told a future home site near the east frontage might become available through association coordination, and Diane Mercer had invited them to walk the parcels as part of a responsible transition discussion. I printed their statement, attached the photos of the sign, the trail camera images, the county ownership records, Mark Ellison's title confirmation, Emily Carter's parcel printouts, Diane's association-facilitated transfer email, and the sheriff incident number, then sent the full packet to Linda Brooks, the Pine Hollow Board secretary. I did not write an emotional letter. I wrote one clean request. Confirm in writing that Pine Hollow Estates had no authority to list, market, show, sell, transfer, or represent my private parcels, and preserve all communications related to Diane's sign, vendor instruction, buyer contact, and transfer review. Linda replied that afternoon with a tone very different from Diane's. She said the board had not voted to place a sign on my property, had not authorized any sale discussion involving my lots, and would hold an emergency review at the clubhouse on Thursday. When I walked into that meeting, I carried one binder and the sign itself, still clean enough to show how new the mistake had been. Diane sat near the head of the table with her folder closed, looking more annoyed than worried. Linda opened the meeting by saying the issue was not whether undeveloped land near Pine Hollow affected neighborhood appearance. The issue was whether the association had represented private property as available without the owner's written authorization. I placed the warranty deed on the table first, then the county parcel printouts, then the tax records, then the subdivision plat showing Pine Hollow's boundary ending before my lots, then Mark's title letter confirming no association, ownership, sale authority, listing right, transfer right, or recorded interest. After that, I placed Diane's email beside the signed photo and the buyer's statement. Linda asked Diane what document she relied on when ordering the sign. Diane said Pine Hollow had long considered those parcels part of the community growth corridor. Linda asked for a recorded document. Diane said the lots affected planned residential continuity. Another board member asked for my signature on any listing or transfer authorization. Diane said the association had been exploring pathways, not selling. I turned the sign face up on the table so the board could read the words "Inquire" through association office. The room went quiet. The board attorney reviewed the packet and said Pine Hollow could not market, show, or imply availability of property it did not own without the owner's authorization or valid legal process. That sentence ended the performance. The board voted to issue a written correction to the buyers, management staff, and any person who had contacted the office about my lots. They also adopted a policy barring any officer from discussing sale, transfer, development control, or availability of non-association property without legal review and recorded authority. Diane was removed from all property communications immediately, and before the next regular meeting, she resigned as president, claiming the board had chosen technical paperwork over community vision. A week later, I installed proper private property markers, filed my mowing schedule with the county where required, and began planning the lots on my own timeline. The land still looked empty from the road, but it was never empty in the only place that mattered. It had parcel numbers, tax records, survey stakes, and a deed. Diane had tried to sell a story with a sign, but a sign can point at land without changing who owns it. The lots were empty, but the ownership record was not.